There's something in the depths of Loch Ness. For nearly 1,500 years, thousands of people have witnessed something inexplicable emerge from these black, icy waters. Over 1,100 official sightings, dozens of scientific expeditions, millions of dollars invested in research, and yet, the mystery remains unsolved. So what really happened in the Scottish lake that has captivated the entire world for almost a century? Today, we're going to separate fact from fiction, explore the most recent scientific evidence, and understand why this monster continues to fascinate us even after science has had its say. Get comfortable, because we're diving into one of the most captivating enigmas of modern history. Before we talk about viral photos and modern expeditions, we need to go back much further in time. The first written mention of the monster dates from the year 565 AD. An Irish monk, Saint Columba, allegedly encountered a terrifying creature in the River Ness. According to legend, while traveling through Scotland to convert the Picts to Christianity, he came upon locals burying a man. This man had just been attacked by an aquatic beast that had dragged him underwater. Columba then sent one of his companions to swim into the river to retrieve a boat, and the creature surfaced again. That's when the saint supposedly raised his hand, made the sign of the cross, and commanded the beast to retreat. And apparently, it obeyed. Now, before we cry miracle, let's remember we're talking about a religious text written a century after the events. This kind of story was common currency back then to illustrate the power of Christian faith over pagan forces. But what's interesting is that this story shows there was already a tradition of mysterious aquatic creatures in this region of Scotland. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, 21 sightings were documented, but they remained sporadic and local. The Scots had their own legends of kelpies, these malevolent water horses that took an alluring form on land to attract travelers before dragging them into the depths. A local tale recounts that in the early 1800s, a man named James McGrigor encountered one of these kelpies near Loch Ness. Rather than mount this magnificent stallion, he drew his claymore and cut off its bridle, the source of its powers. The kelpie begged him to return this magical object, but McGrigor fled home, thus saving the region from future disappearances. These stories show how deeply legends of aquatic creatures were embedded in local culture, long before Nessie became a global star. But what really transformed a local folkloric legend into a worldwide phenomenon was the year 1933. And guess what? It's largely because of a road. That year, construction was completed on a new road along the northern shore of Loch Ness, offering for the first time clear and continuous views of the lake. Until then, access was difficult, and people didn't spend their time scanning the water. On April 15, 1933, Aldi Mackay, manager of the Drum the Drocket Hotel, and her husband were driving on this new road when they spotted something enormous in the water. She would describe it as a whale-like creature, rolling and plunging in the loch, creating spectacular disturbances. Journalist Alex Campbell wrote the article for the Inverness Courier, published on May 2, 1933. It was in this article that the term monster appeared for the first time, suggested by editor Evan Barron. And that was the beginning of the media frenzy. On July 22nd of the same year, George Spicer and his wife had an even stranger experience. They were driving on the road when, about 200 meters ahead of them, they saw a gray form crossing the road. Spicer described it as having a massive body, about 1.2 meters high and 7.6 meters long, with a long, undulating neck. No visible legs. The thing rushed toward the lake, leaving a trail of crushed vegetation behind it. Spicer would later say it was the nearest approach to a dragon or prehistoric animal that I have ever seen in my life. It was Spicer who, in August 1933, first suggested it might be some sort of prehistoric reptile. 5 days later, a journalist made the connection to a plesiosaur, those long-necked marine reptiles from the Jurassic era. And there you have it. The popular image of Nessie was born. Letters flooded into the newspaper. Everyone wanted to tell what they'd seen. People talked about monster fish, sea serpents, dragons. The London press sent correspondence. A circus even offered a reward of £20,000 sterling to capture the beast. Loch Ness became the center of worldwide attention. In November 1933, Hugh Gray took the first photograph purportedly of the monster. He was walking his dog near the village of Foyers when he saw a large creature emerge from the water and took several shots. Only one photo was usable, showing a blurry form with what could be a long neck and thick body. Many think it's simply his dog swimming with a stick in its mouth, but the debate remains open. And then came what would become the most iconic image of the Loch Ness Monster. On April 21, 1934, the Daily Mail published what would be called the surgeon's photograph. It showed what appeared to be a long neck and small head emerging from the dark waters of the loch. The photo was attributed to Robert Kenneth Wilson, a respected London gynecologist. Wilson recounted that he was in Scotland for a duck hunting trip when he noticed a disturbance on the water's surface. He quickly took 4 photos with his borrowed camera, of which only 2 showed anything clear. This photo would become the definitive image of the Loch Ness Monster. It circulated around the world. People now knew what Nessie looked like. The image perfectly matched the idea of a surviving plesiosaur. It was exactly what everyone wanted to believe. And for 60 years, this photo would fuel the myth. But here's the thing, it was all fake. A monumental hoax that wasn't revealed until 1994. That year, Christian Sperling, 90 years old and near death, made an explosive confession to 2 Loch Ness researchers, David Martin and Alistair Boyd. He revealed that he had fabricated the monster in 1934 with his stepfather, Marmaduke Wetherell. So who was this Wetherell, and why did he do it? Quick flashback. In December 1933, the Daily Mail had hired Wetherell, a famous big game hunter, to locate the monster. Wetherell found large footprints on the lakeshore, which he attributed to a very powerful, soft-footed animal about 6 meters long. The newspaper published the discovery with great fanfare, except that zoologists from the Natural History Museum in London examined the tracks and discovered they were all identical and had been made with an ashtray or umbrella stand that had a dried hippopotamus foot as its base. It's unclear whether Wetherell was complicit or a victim, but the Daily Mail publicly ridiculed him. Humiliated and furious, Wetherell decided to get revenge. His son would later recall him saying, "We'll give them their monster." He contacted Sperling, a sculptor and model specialist, and asked him to fabricate a convincing monster. Sperling bought a toy submarine from Woolworth for about 30 centimeters long and fixed a head and neck sculpted from wood putty onto the turret. They placed the model on the loch and took photos. The trick? They cropped the image to hide the real scale. In the original uncropped version, you can clearly see the opposite shore of the loch, showing that the monster is only a few meters from the edge and ridiculously small. Wetherell then entrusted the photos to Robert Wilson, whose role was to serve as a credible front. Wilson was a respected man, and the fact that he refused to associate his name with the photo added an aura of mystery and credibility. He would always claim to have taken the photo himself. For 6 decades, this photo shaped the popular image of the Loch Ness Monster. It was analyzed, scrutinized, debated. In 1984, Stuart Campbell, in an article in the British Journal of Photography, had already concluded that the object in the water could only measure 60 to 90 centimeters long at most, probably an otter or seabird. But it wasn't until Sperling's confession in 1994 that the truth exploded into public view. The revelation made headlines, but curiously, it only slightly cooled the enthusiasm of believers and tourists. The myth had become stronger than reality, and the surgeon's photo was just the beginning. Over the decades, countless other hoaxes emerged. In 1960, British aeronautical engineer Tim Dinsdale filmed what appeared to be a dark hump moving through the water. The film is grainy and inconclusive, with some thinking it shows a boat, but it added to the myth. In 1977, magician Anthony "Doc" Shields claimed to have summoned the creature out of the water near Urquhart Castle, and took what he claimed were the clearest photos of the monster ever obtained. He described it as an elephant squid with a long neck serving as a trunk. The absence of ripples on the water's surface and the translucent appearance of the image quickly led to cries of fakery. In 2012, Captain George Edwards claimed to have photographed Nessie on November 2, 2011. Edwards claimed to have spent 26 years searching for the monster, spending 60 hours a week on the loch aboard his boat, the Nessie Hunter 4, taking tourists on excursions. He stated, "In my opinion, it probably looks like a manatee, but it's not a mammal. When people see 3 humps, they're probably seeing 3 separate monsters." Other researchers quickly questioned the authenticity of the photo, and Steve Feltham, a Loch Ness researcher, suggested that the object in the water was a fiberglass hump used in a National Geographic documentary in which Edwards had participated. Edwards eventually admitted it was a hoax. The list continues. Between blurry photos, grainy videos, exaggerated testimonies, and deliberate fakes, the Loch Ness Monster has generated an astronomical amount of false evidence. But why? Some seek fame, others want to attract tourists to their region, and a few simply find it amusing to perpetuate the myth. If you enjoy this kind of content about unsolved mysteries and fascinating legends, remember to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. It really helps us continue producing this type of quality content. Despite all these hoaxes, serious scientists have looked into the question. Because ultimately, if we set aside the fraudsters, there remain hundreds of testimonies from honest people who saw something unusual. So what's really happening in this lake? Loch Ness is a unique place. It's one of the largest freshwater lakes in Britain, measuring about 37 kilometers long, 1.6 kilometers wide, and reaching 240 meters deep at its deepest point. It contains more than 7 billion cubic meters of fresh water, more than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. The water is dark and murky, tinted with peat, which considerably limits visibility. In other words, it's the perfect place for a monster to hide, if one exists. Between 1962 and 1977, the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau conducted a systematic investigation. Volunteers monitored the lake for years. They closed shop in 1977 without having found significant evidence. In 1987, Operation Deep Scan mobilized 24 boats equipped with sonar to sweep the entire length of the loch. They detected 3 unexplained sonar contacts, but nothing conclusive. The readings could correspond to large objects, but impossible to say exactly what. Schools of fish? Debris? A large animal? The mystery remained. Over the years, several other sonar expeditions were conducted in the 80s and 90s. All came back with similar results. A few intriguing readings, but nothing proving the existence of a large, unknown creature. In 2003, another complete sonar search of the loch was carried out by the BBC. They used 600 separate sonar beams to cover every cubic meter of water. Result? No sign of a monster. But that didn't end the debate. Believers argued that the monster could have been in an underwater cave or simply moved to an uncovered area at the time of the sweep. And then, in 2018, an international team of scientists decided to approach the problem differently. Instead of searching visually or with sonar, why not look for the monster's DNA? Environmental DNA, or eDNA, is a technique that allows detection of genetic traces that all living organisms leave in their environment. Every time an animal swims, eats, defecates, or sheds skin cells, it leaves DNA in the water. It's like an invisible biological signature. Professor Neil Gemmell from the University of Otago in New Zealand led the project. In June 2018, his team collected more than 250 water samples at different depths and different locations in the loch over a 2-week period. They also compared these samples with those from 5 other Scottish lakes without monsters to have a reference. The samples were then analyzed in the laboratory. The team sequenced more than 500 million DNA sequences and identified about 3,000 different species living in and around Loch Ness. They found DNA from 11 fish species, 3 amphibians, 22 birds, and 19 mammals. They even detected a lot of DNA from terrestrial species: humans, dogs, sheep, cows, deer, badgers, foxes, rabbits, voles, and various bird species. All this shows how effective environmental DNA can be for mapping biodiversity. But the Loch Ness Monster? Zero. No trace. No plesiosaur DNA, obviously, as these animals disappeared 65 million years ago. No DNA from large reptiles either. No Greenland shark. No giant catfish. No sturgeon. Nothing that corresponds to the idea of a large, unknown creature. Gemmell is clear in his conclusions. We don't find any evidence of a creature that would be even remotely related to a Jurassic-era reptile in our environmental DNA sequence data. So, sorry. I don't think the plesiosaur idea holds water based on the data we've obtained. But wait, there's an intriguing detail. The researchers discovered an enormous amount of eel DNA, eels everywhere, at practically every sampled location. Gemmell stated, "There is a very significant amount of eel DNA. Eels are very abundant in Loch Ness. Eel DNA was found at pretty much every location sampled. There are a lot of them." European eels can normally reach 1.2 to 1.8 meters long, but some divers have claimed to have seen eels as thick as their leg in the loch. Is this an exaggeration? Hard to say. DNA data doesn't reveal the size of creatures, only their presence. So, do giant eels exist in Loch Ness? It's possible, but not proven. Gemmell concludes cautiously. Based on our data, giant eels remain a plausible idea. It's the most likely theory that emerges from this study. Not as exciting as a surviving dinosaur, but scientifically much more credible. A giant eel could explain some observations of long, dark forms moving through the water, especially in the poor visibility of the loch. It's important to note that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. As Gemmell points out, Loch Ness is vast, and given that environmental DNA signals in the water dissipate quickly, lasting only a few days to a few weeks at most, there remains the possibility that there's something present that we didn't detect because we sampled in the wrong places at the wrong time, or that our meta-barcoding method couldn't detect Nessie because the sequence didn't match anything in the sequence databases. In other words, there's always a small margin of uncertainty, but for the scientific community, the verdict is pretty clear. There's no prehistoric monster in Loch Ness. What people are seeing are probably combinations of natural phenomena, known animals, and human psychology. So if it's not a plesiosaur, and probably not a giant eel either, what have people been seeing all these years? Scientists and skeptics have proposed more than 85 different theories. Some are quite reasonable, others completely far-fetched. Among serious explanations, we find waves and boat wakes. Loch Ness is long and narrow, which can create unusual waves, especially in windy weather. A passing boat can create a wake that, seen from a distance, looks like something moving through the water. Light reflections on the water can also create optical illusions. Tree trunks and plant debris are another common explanation. When a tree trunk floats vertically in the water with just a part sticking out, it can resemble a long neck. Decomposition gases can cause these trunks to surface suddenly and surprisingly. Seals and otters are present in the loch, although occasionally, a seal swimming with just its head out of the water can resemble something much larger from a distance. Otters, when they swim in a line, can create the illusion of multiple humps moving together. Aquatic birds, especially cormorants, can also fool the eye. When they swim with their long neck extended and body partially submerged, they can resemble a mysterious creature. And then there are the more exotic explanations that some have proposed over the years. The idea of circus elephants coming to bathe came up 3 times independently in 1934, 1979, and 2005. Each time, the person thought they had an original idea. People have also suggested whales, sharks, ocean sunfish, anacondas, camels, walruses, moose, and even commandos mounted on camels in diving suits for secret operations in the Middle East. I swear, this isn't a joke. Someone really sent this theory to Neil Gemmell. But beyond physical explanations, there's a crucial psychological element. This phenomenon is called expectant attention. When we expect to see something, or really want to see it, our brain is more likely to interpret ambiguous visual cues as being the thing we're expecting. If you're walking along the edge of Loch Ness, having heard all the monster stories, your brain is in monster search mode. You see an unusual movement in the water, a strange reflection, a floating object, and your brain automatically completes the image. It's the monster. It's the same psychological mechanism that explains continued sightings of Tasmanian tigers, extinct since 1936, or Bigfoot in North America. People so badly want these creatures to exist that they see evidence where there isn't necessarily any. But then, why? Why does this fascination continue? Why, even after the surgeon's photo was revealed as a hoax, even after DNA studies found nothing, do people continue to believe, search, and visit Loch Ness, hoping to glimpse something? The answer is deeply human. Monsters and mythical creatures fulfill a psychological need in us. They represent mystery, the unknown, the possibility that our rational and well-mapped world still contains surprises. In an era when almost every corner of the planet has been explored, photographed, and documented by satellite, the idea that a large creature could still hide in a Scottish lake is seductive. It reminds us that nature still keeps secrets. There's also something deeply comforting about local legends and myths. The Loch Ness Monster is part of Scottish identity. It's a story that unites communities, passed down from generation to generation. For locals, Nessie isn't just a monster. It's a cultural symbol, a source of local pride and, let's be honest, a significant source of tourism revenue. Tourism related to Nessie brings in about $80 million a year to the Scottish economy. Thousands of people visit Loch Ness each year, hoping to spot the creature. There are museums, interpretation centers, lake cruises, souvenir shops. An entire industry has been built around this myth. The Loch Ness Centre in Drumnadrochit attracts visitors from around the world with its interactive exhibits, special effects, and research artifacts. Sightings continue, by the way. In 2025, the first potential sighting of the year was reported at Dora's Beach, where someone saw what appeared to be a large, dark mass under the calm water. Each year brings its share of new sightings, most now filmed with smartphones, analyzed on social media, debated in online forums. The official Loch Ness Sightings Register, maintained by Gary Campbell since 1996, continues to grow. Campbell, an accountant by profession and Nessie believer, meticulously documents every reported sighting, even though he acknowledges that many may have rational explanations. Dr. Maurice Burton, a zoologist who spent decades studying the phenomenon, finally concluded that most sightings were probably decomposing plant matter rising to the surface. But even he admitted there were a few cases that left him perplexed. Sightings made in perfect conditions, by multiple credible witnesses, that didn't correspond to any simple explanation. Beyond science and tourism, the Loch Ness Monster has become a true pop culture phenomenon. Nessie appears in dozens of films, TV series, books, and video games. From children's cartoons to horror thrillers, the creature has taken 1,000 different faces. In the 1970s, Billy Wilder's film The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes used the Loch Ness Monster as a central plot element. More recently, films like The Water Horse in 2007 presented a more sympathetic and family-friendly version of the legend, telling the story of a Scottish boy who finds a mysterious egg that hatches into an aquatic creature. The film suggests that Nessie isn't a single creature, but a species that reproduces periodically. In the animated series Scooby-Doo, the Loch Ness Monster makes a memorable appearance, revealed, of course, as being a man in disguise. It's become a cultural trope, the mysterious monster that turns out to have a mundane explanation. The Loch Ness Monster has also influenced other lake legends around the world. After Nessie's popularity in the 1930s, reports of lake monsters began surfacing everywhere. Champ, in Lake Champlain in the United States, Ogopogo in Lake Okanagan in Canada, Morag in Loch Morar in Scotland. It's as if Nessie gave people around the world permission to look at their own local lakes and imagine what might be hiding there. Here's the cruel paradox of the Loch Ness Monster. For the creature to exist, it can't be alone. You'd need a breeding population of at least 10 to 20 individuals to maintain a viable species over the long term. With inbreeding and genetic risks, even 20 individuals would be an absolute minimum. Realistically, we're talking about dozens of animals, perhaps even 100. Now, think about what that means. If 50 to 100 large aquatic creatures lived in Loch Ness, they'd have to eat enormously. A rough estimate suggests that a 6-meter plesiosaur would need to consume about 30 kilos of fish per day to maintain its body temperature. Multiply that by 50 or 100 creatures, and you're talking about tons of fish consumed daily. Yet, studies on fish populations in Loch Ness show no sign of such massive predation. Moreover, these creatures would have to breathe. If they're reptiles like a plesiosaur, they'd have to surface regularly to breathe air. With dozens of individuals, we should have constant and clear sightings, not occasional ambiguous glimpses. Seals and dolphins in Scottish waters are seen regularly precisely because they have to breathe. Why would Nessie be different? And then there's the question of reproduction and death. If a viable population has existed for centuries, even millennia, where are the corpses? No bodies, no skeletons, no bones have ever been found. Some arguments try to explain that bodies sink and decompose in the depths, but even in that case, remains would eventually be discovered. Lakes are regularly probed, dredged, explored by divers and submarines. How could an entire population of giant animals die and disappear without leaving a physical trace? Evolutionary biology also poses problems. How would a population of plesiosaurs, marine reptiles from the Cretaceous era, have survived the mass extinction that killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago? How would they have migrated to a freshwater lake in Scotland when this lake only formed about 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age? Before that, the region was covered in ice. There was no lake. So even if plesiosaurs had miraculously survived until recently, they couldn't have lived in Loch Ness before its formation. All these logical and scientific arguments converge toward the same conclusion. The Loch Ness Monster, as traditionally imagined, cannot exist. The laws of biology, ecology, and physics are against it. And yet, sightings continue. Here's the brutal truth. The Loch Ness Monster probably doesn't exist. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. The 2018 DNA study was the final nail in the coffin. The hoaxes have been revealed. Rational explanations cover practically all sightings. If you put money on the table, you should bet there's no monster. And yet, Nessie will never die. Not really. Because Nessie is no longer just a hypothetical biological creature. It's become an idea, a symbol, a myth in the purest sense of the term. Myths don't die just because they're scientifically refuted. They persist because they respond to deep human needs. Nessie represents our collective refusal to accept that the world is entirely known and predictable. It represents our desire for wonder, our nostalgia for a time when maps bore the inscription, "Here be dragons." It represents our hope that nature still keeps secrets, that adventure is still possible, that the next turn might reveal something extraordinary. In a sense, it doesn't matter if the monster exists biologically. It exists in our collective imagination. And that's perhaps where it was always meant to live. People will continue to visit Loch Ness, scan its dark waters, hope to glimpse something inexplicable. Some will do so out of sincere belief, others out of amused curiosity, and still others simply to participate in a fascinating cultural tradition. And who knows? Maybe someday, someone will really find something. Maybe there really is an exceptionally large eel somewhere in those depths. Maybe a new species of fish, still unidentified, lives in the deepest zones of the lake. Science is sometimes wrong. Creatures thought extinct are rediscovered. Unknown species are discovered regularly. The coelacanth, a prehistoric fish believed extinct for 65 million years, was found alive in 1938. Who's to say something similar couldn't happen at Loch Ness? Probably not a plesiosaur. Probably not a 15-meter-long monster, but maybe something. And it's that maybe that keeps the magic alive. It's that tiny percentage of uncertainty that allows the myth to endure despite all contrary evidence. So next time you hear someone talk about the Loch Ness Monster, don't be too quick to dismiss it condescendingly. Yes, it's almost certainly a myth. Yes, science has done its job. But this myth tells us something important about who we are as a species, about our need for wonder and mystery, about our refusal to let rationality completely kill our imagination. The Loch Ness Monster is proof that even in the age of Google Maps and satellites, even when every square inch of the planet is visible from space, we still find ways to believe in magic. And frankly, in a world that can sometimes seem too small, too rational, too predictable, that's perhaps exactly what we need.